I agree. Wow, what an awesome crowd. I have truly been impressed with everybody I've met. So I was looking forward to this, and I spent some time talking about it to myself. So I wanted to share with you what I call the 7 deadly sins of interior design. Now, these sins will not bring the same biblical retribution that you know from your Bible, but they can cost money and they can cost time. Those are two very important things when you're working on a design project. So what's the first one? Well, without a plan, you can't even begin to talk about what you're going to do. It's really important to understand. You know somebody, all of you know somebody. Honey, I went out and bought the best looking chair you've ever seen. It's going to be great in that room. They get it home, they look at it. Oh my God, what an awful thing. What did I do? Now, they're either going to send the chair back, but they bought it at the design center, they got it at wholesale. They can't return it. They're going to have to redo the room anyway. It's very important to create a plan so that you know where you're going. Many people spend more time developing a shopping list for the grocery than they do a plan for a room that's going to cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I don't understand it. If you have questions or comment, just ask me. Just throw them out. Now, of course, if you work without a budget, what's going to happen? Most professional interior designers will work with you to develop a budget for your project. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be sticking their hand in your pocket every 5 minutes and digging money out. What they're going to do is listen to what you have to say, listen to what you think the project should be and what it should cost, and then develop the plan so that they meet that budget. Again, a professional isn't going to try to go over the budget, isn't going to try to spend more money than you say you want to spend. They're going to try to help you make the best possible selections from what's available. This is my favorite. You all know them. What makes you think your girlfriend is going to be interested in exactly you getting a better room than she has? Designing by committee is not a good idea. You don't go to lunch with everybody and have a couple of drinks and say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They're all going to tell you something different. The problem is their sense of style and what's right for them and their family is different from what's right for you and your family. So stick to your principles and understand that you share your decisions, you share your ideas with a professional designer, you'll get a much better product at the end of the day. It's been in the family forever. I couldn't get rid of it. Everything has a shelf life. And it may have been Grandma Mason's perfectly gorgeous chair, but in your room, in today's styles, it maybe doesn't work. Give it another life. Give it to one of your kids. If they say, oh, honey, I didn't want that 50 years ago, I don't want it now. Give it away. Give it to a charity. Give it to someone who can use it again in a way that maybe you can't. But just holding on to something because you have it isn't going to enhance the interior, isn't going to make it better or easier to create a new look. So it's difficult. Change is hard. I understand that. But you want to be able to move forward and create a room that really is right for the way you live today. Along with this, a lot of people will buy a new home and think, oh, all the furniture fits. And actually, some of the pieces may. But every single piece is not going to work in the new house. And you want to make sure that you are very precise about what you take with you and what you move on and what you add when you get to the new house, which is also a lot of fun. What I'm talking about here is value for money. I really like it. I do this too. I like it when I go out and I go to the most expensive shop in town. I want to look at what is high quality merchandise, how is it finished, how is it produced, what does it feel like. A $5,000 Vera Wang dress isn't the same dress for $49.95 at Penny's. I understand that. But you may find something for $150 at Ross that is lined, that looks good, that meets a lot of the same criteria. And then you start looking at accessorizing it and other ways to enhance the product. But what you've developed is a good sense of value for money. You want to know that. You want to know. And you have to shop. You have to look at a lot of different things to understand what's out there and what might be the best choice for your space without spending $5,000 on a little black dress, although that can be fun sometimes. By the way, when you go shopping at all these shops, don't take the credit cards. Scale and proportion. It's a difficult concept for people who aren't in the business like I am. But as you see, the chair is far outscales the little sofa. Scale is the size of each piece that you're looking at. Proportion is how they relate one to the other. And what we're looking at here is a disproportionate comparison between the very large chair and the small little sofa. So trying to understand some rudimentary idea of what scale and proportion is all about is going to help you understand the look of the room and what's going to fit and what's not going to fit. Does anybody have a question? I'm just rattling on here. Unlined drapery. This is one of my pet peeves, actually, so maybe it's not a deadly sin, but it's one of the things I really believe in. My mother was a costume designer. I grew up with fabrics all of my life. I began to understand fabrics and the way dresses were constructed and the way costumes were constructed. And unlined drapery to me is such a sin. The lining helps the drapery fall properly. It helps it drape properly. And by the way, drape is a verb, not a noun. So drapery is the proper term for window treatments, except here in the South where they call them curtains. And that's okay because I grew up in the South. So from a structural standpoint, it's also very important. The lining protects the fabric that you've spent hundreds of dollars for from the sun, from the weather, from the heat, and from the cold. And that's an important thing. So you want to make sure that you have drapery that's prepared and built properly. For me, it has to look like a ball gown. It has to be finished the same way. You put the right kind of trim on it, you put the right kind of finish on it, you use the right kind of pleating system, and you're going to have a window treatment that will last for years and years and years. Yes?
I do have a question regarding drapery. I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to designing my home, and I just use the toppers, not the full drapes. What's your perception on that one theory with drapery?
Every single window is different, and every appropriate application changes with each window. So if indeed just a top treatment is the appropriate treatment, by all means, that's what you do. I still think it should be lined, but it can be a cornice, which is a hard piece, rather than a pleated piece, which is a valance. What you can do is what's called just stationary panels on either side of the window that don't open and close. They simply help frame the view. So those work as well. You've got to have another question. Nobody has a question. Ask me a question. Oh, lay it on me.
I have a question. Would you talk a little bit about your experience in dealing with couples and the dynamics that exist between them? As they have spirit exchanges and differences of opinion about what to do in a house or a room.
I'm not a marriage counselor. I don't pretend to be a marriage counselor. And quite often what we suggest early on is one or the other of you should be the spokesperson for the couple. That doesn't mean that we don't have spirited exchanges in the room. But what's interesting is, not as a mediator, but simply as a person who's bringing a different perspective to what we're doing, I quite often help deflect those arguments. And they're not arguments, they're just a conversation about what I like, what you like, honey. And I'm right, aren't I? Yes, Kate?
It's all right to have someone who has the version of picking a housekeeper room, have their own room in the house.
Well,
Would that withdraw away from the rest of the house and
fortunately, a lot of houses have doors. and I do agree that if there's a, if you need to have a space, quite often, quote, a man has a den, a woman has a sewing room. I don't find a problem with that at all. And, the carpets don't even have to match. You're going to close the door anyway. So I think that it's important to make the house comfortable for you and make it work for you and your family, irrespective of what any interior designer says or what any magazine says at all. Yes?
What can you do when the covers over the air conditioning vent or the heating vent and you want to maximize the heating air conditioning?
Call an architect. Well, in those instances, there are a couple of different solutions. I wouldn't suggest raising the drapery because that's not a good look. I mean, it does need to, as I describe it, drapery needs to kiss the floor. But what you can do is using tiebacks, move it away from the window a little bit more. There are a lot of different ways to sort of dress the drapery so that it moves away from the vents particularly. And quite often vents are smack in front of a window, and I understand that. So I really do appreciate your time today. I've had a great time. Thank you so much for listening to me.